Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the beginning of the producer licensing track. I'm Karen Hornig, a team member at NIPR, and I just want to tell everybody this isn't church, so move to the front. Remember what we talked about connections yesterday, so let's get better connected by moving to the front. Producer licensing, as we all know, it's the most fun group of regulators. That is not a secret within the regulatory community. That is just a fact, right? And so we're looking forward to spending time with you over the next day and a half and spending some time with you tonight. Before I talk about all the things I got wrong in the last 10 years, I want to ask, how many folks here, is this your first summit? And raise your hands virtually. Do it again, please. I'm sorry. That's a lot. Welcome. We're just thrilled that you're here. Regulators, how many of you have been with your department for less than a year? Okay. And how about our colleagues in the industry? How many of you have been in this space for less than a year? All right, so we have some vets, but we have some new folks to the summit, so that's great. Thank you to the people who are joining us online, and please stay engaged in the conversation through chat, and I think Slido is going to be used to answer, I don't know where to look when talking to people virtually, and so we appreciate you being here. So, 10 years ago in July, I started as a team member at NIPR. I had been Deputy Insurance Commissioner in the great state of Maryland, woo! At the Maryland Insurance Administration, and I joined the NIPR team. And at that time, the concept of insurtechs, small startup businesses that were focused on technology and the insurance industry, were absolutely just raging into the marketplace. And the concept that big tech was going to take over the insurance space. Everybody was talking about disruption, that the insurance industry was going to be disrupted just like Uber disrupted the taxi industry. And so I started, and I was trying to figure out how software is developed. How do you secure data? What the heck is an affiliation? And because I'd moved to Kansas City, I lived in Kansas City for 6 years, I was trying to figure out how to be Midwest nice. It never worked, and I moved back to Maryland. So I'm at the same time trying to learn this sort of new job. All the messages I am getting in the trades is disruption, disruption, disruption. And I stood on this stage or a similar stage in 2014, 15, 16 and made some real dire predictions about the insurance industry, and most of them were wrong. So today is sort of a true confession. Today I want to talk about what were those trends that really didn't make it? What were the changes that have had a lasting impact on the industry? And what's coming next? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm hoping to leave, for those of you who know me, sometimes I can get carried away, but the plan is to leave enough time so we can have a bit of a conversation as well. So insurance is about trying to predict the future by being informed by the past, but it's all about trying to anticipate the future, right? How many big storms are we going to have? Are wildfires going to continue or lessen? Are people going to live longer? Are people healthier or not? Are people going to continue to drive like maniacs? These are all questions that we are constantly trying to ask. and look into the future. This particular gentleman, looking into his crystal ball, I think was trying to determine if the tie was going to stay in fashion, and it did not, in case anybody's wondering. So we were, at the time, really trying to anticipate what was next in insurance. And there were 4 things that I really did think were going to happen that didn't. And I want to talk to you about those 4 things. And the real sort of big theme of this is that insurance is a very difficult industry to completely disrupt. It's not taxi cabs. It is a complex, difficult industry. And as there's an author who writes a lot about the future of insurance, Brian Falchuk, as he said, you have to think more about evolution and not revolution. So one of the things that I really thought was going to be revolutionary, and was not, was that the industry would be taken over by insurtechs and big tech companies like Google and Amazon, both of whom, as you may remember, got into the business and then what? Got out. Full stack insurance companies are the concept there. Do we remember Lemonade? Hearing about Lemonade, right? And it still exists. Lemonade still exists today. The concept is that you could underwrite insurance, sell insurance, create the product, put it into the marketplace, and adjust a claim all digitally without much, if any, involvement by a human, that it could all be done by algorithms. There have been insurtechs, there are still a handful of full stack insurers that are operating, some who have started hiring agents and brokers, but it has not caused the disruption that was anticipated about 10 years ago. For those of you who don't know, this is the Trade Federation droid army from Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Every time I hear the word drone, I think of droid, and so when people talk about drones, I picture this, so I had to share. One of the things that was talked about 10 years ago was claim automation. Claims are going to be fully automated. We're not going to need adjusters. We are going to be able to process claims quickly and, again, without much human involvement. Have drones been of value to the industry? Of course they have. Courtney just shook her head. Courtney from Oklahoma just shook her head. And in a state where you have catastrophes that affect big swaths of geography, they can be a very helpful tool. A very helpful tool for a carrier to assess what the damage is. But what the industry has found is claims are complicated. Each one is an individual fact set, and while technology can help augment humans, you still need human judgment because every claim, most claims are different. The third one I really got wrong was blockchain and Bitcoin. I was so stoked about blockchain. I sat through more presentations about what it was going to do, trying to understand what a dispersed ledger really was. But I was convinced that this was something we had to take seriously and really jump on board with. Unless perhaps you are Sam Bankman-Fried, you are not paying your premiums with Bitcoin. And I don't even think, I guess is the state of New York paying his premiums now, I would imagine. So this is an example, as I look back on it, as a technological advancement in search of a business problem, as opposed to the other way around. The best technical innovation and disruption occurs when you have a clearly defined business problem and you can apply great tech to that. And we haven't figured it out yet with blockchain. I would say stay tuned. I'm not giving up on it. Stay tuned, but I think we're a long way away. And the last one, of course, were the dire predictions about agents and brokers. 10 years ago, you couldn't pick up a trade publication without reading about the demise of the agent and broker, right? For me, as a team member at NIPR, that was kind of a big deal because it's very important to our business. So what we saw were headlines that were predicting huge disruption. Insurtechs, big tech, all kinds of technological tools like wearables, plugins, and the big one, and we saw it over and over and over again, was that the demographic information indicated that 1 in 4 insurance agents would be gone by 2018. We were standing on the cliff of complete disruption, and technology was getting ready to push us over the edge. Well, in fact, since 2013, we've had a 73% increase in the number of producer licenses in the United States, and a 10% increase in the number of individuals. So we have actually more people selling insurance, and those people holding more and more licenses, not less. So why was the disruption so overstated? What was it that we, as an industry, got wrong? And I would say there are 3 things as I look back on it now. We underestimated or we overestimated the risk appetite of the industry. We didn't understand incumbency of legacy insurers. And insurance ain't taxis. It is a very, very complex business. So let's walk through those 3 things. The insurance industry is about caution. It is about risk mitigation. It is about being careful. And so industry not only will not jump off that cliff, it's not even going to walk to the edge and look down because that's risky behavior. Typically, and the industry has been criticized, that they have lagged in terms of adoption of technology. The industry, and we as the regulators of that industry, hung on to paper a lot longer than some industries did. So we tend to be more cautious. So it is not surprising as you look back that the industry was not fast to risk the industry to disruption. The second thing is incumbency. Most insurance companies in the United States have been around a long time, and they have invested a lot in building trust and name recognition and relationships with customers. My grandmother used to talk about her insurance agent to her house and collecting her premiums at her kitchen table. And I think she even got china or something. Like, I think if she paid her premiums on time every year or something, she got some china or something. When I was a kid, on Sunday nights at 7 o'clock, you would tune in to Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. Programming was sponsored by insurance companies. You knew the names of Pacific Life and MetLife and New York Life. You knew these were brand names and trusted businesses. On the property and casualty side, advertising started out to be very serious, very serious. Car accidents, burning houses. There was one famous one where, you know, a kid's crying because he's just lost his father. They were really bummers. And at some point, back in the 60s, and then really blew up in the 70s, somebody decided that we needed to introduce humor into the marketing of insurance. And that was a small reptile, started that trend. These property and casualty companies in the personal lines space spend around $1 billion each on advertising every year. If you are a startup, that's tough to match. You have no name recognition. You have to meet the significant capital requirements that we expect as regulators, and you have to overcome the deficit of no data. These companies have enormous amounts of historical data. As a result of the investment in these customer relationships that these incumbent companies have made, despite streaming services, despite the change in how we watch things on our screens, these brands have become part of our popular culture, and nowhere is that truer than in Kansas City. I think, is Brenda here from Missouri? Is Brenda here? Brenda, I have a question for you, girl. Do you think that Mahomes and Maotto should have to have a producer license? Because I do. And I think you need to talk to Clora about that. I told Gary Anderson, who's the CEO of the NEIC, we should have had Travis as our guest speaker yesterday morning because he's a member of the industry now. This stuff is tough to overcome. And so we can't underestimate the power of the incumbent. The last thing that I think we missed when we were talking about disruption about a decade ago was the complexity of the industry. And the complexity in two ways. First is the complexity of the product. This visual kind of represents a lot of handoffs, and it's how I picture the value chain in insurance. Whether you're talking about how you create the product, whether you're talking about how you underwrite the product, whether you're talking about how you get it to the market, or how you adjust the claims, there are a lot of people involved in that value chain. It is a very, very complicated process. So what you have seen in the insurtech space is, instead of trying to disrupt the whole industry, let's take one of those squares in the value chain and try to make a difference there. Let's try to be more focused and narrow when we talk about a particular business problem. So it is a very complex industry and product line. And the other big source of complexity, well, that would be us. Regulation. Insurance is, and I would argue should be, a very highly regulated industry. Yesterday, if you had the opportunity to hear the commissioner panel at lunchtime yesterday, you would have heard Commissioner Godfrey of North Dakota refer to insurance as a foundation of the national and global economy. And if you don't think that's true, think about what is required to start a business. to buy a home, to drive a car. Everything requires insurance. It's absolutely the foundation of the economy. And as a result, it is highly regulated and on many different levels. We regulate the capital requirements that companies must keep. What do I mean by capital requirements? It means the amount of money set aside that you can't touch in order to pay claims. And it's a lot. It's a lot. We regulate every aspect of that value chain that I was talking about. Disclosures to consumers, how people are licensed, market regulation, fraud, financial regulation, even the quality of the securities that insurance companies can invest in, we regulate. So the regulation is deep and it's dispersed because we do it on a state-by-state basis. 56 different jurisdictions. Many argue that that is inefficient, but it isn't ineffective. In fact, over the last 150 years plus, insurance regulation on the state basis has proven to be highly effective in keeping a strong insurance market with many options for consumers. Are there inefficiencies in the system? Yes. Are there inefficiencies in our space of it? Okay, let's own it, yes. But that's why we're here, that's why we work together. What did we get right? There were a few things that we got right. And what did the InsurTech community in particular bring? Four things that I want to mention about what was right. One is a focus on consumers, the importance of mergers and acquisitions in the insurance space, the ubiquity of technology, and cybersecurity. If you talk to InsurTechs, what they talk about is obsession with the consumer. They're obsessed with the consumer. It was always my favorite phrase. Let's face it, as an industry, we haven't always been really focused on what our customers' needs are. Rather, we focus on what we need them to do for us. So InsurTechs really brought home the concept of customer experience. And we've tried to invest heavily in it at NIPR in order to make it easier for agents and brokers, our producer community, to remain in compliance and to look at their regulatory compliance needs from their perspective and not our perspective. The other reality that we were right about 10 years ago was the ongoing importance of mergers and acquisitions. Over the last 5 years in North America, there have been about 3,500 broker deals, just in the broker space, that have translated into about $39 billion in value. This is a continuing reality in our industry, whether it's at the carrier level or at the agency and broker level. This NIPR, because when a merger and acquisition occurs, there's always an impact on the producer community. They knew that means the compliance team has to. So this is a big deal for when we're talking about producer licensing. And we anticipate that that will continue. I don't think that anybody can argue the ubiquity of technology anymore. It's no longer the guys down the hall that are in some back office. Technology is absolutely integral to what we do every single day. But the reality is it has augmented and not replaced what we do as individuals. In fact, NIPR over the last 10 years have steadily invested heavily in its technology. We changed how we build software. We changed how we stored our platform. We moved to cloud computing. We have leveraged software as a service platforms in order to provide this more modern and more effective technical platform. But guess what we also realized? That as you implement all that new technology, what do you also need? You need all the people who can maintain it and keep it up to date and meet the demands of the business that result from that new technology. New technology gives you greater capabilities. And so you have to have people who can help maintain that. And as a result, our technology spend has grown, as has our staff spending has grown as well. And the last one that I don't think any of us can debate is cybersecurity. In 2014, when I started in July, and in December, the Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, a domicile in Indiana, breach was announced. And it was really the first big breach, very public breach in the insurance space. We'd had the Target breach and Home Depot had been breached. And I think there was maybe this sense that like nobody really noticed insurance too much and we weren't gonna have a problem with cybersecurity. And then Anthem occurred and it was big. And think about what insurers have about you. It isn't just like your auto insurer. Your health insurer has a lot of information about you. And so the Anthem breach, I would say, really got the attention of regulators nationally. And we began at NAIC and NIPR, the one thing that I would say we did do in a fast-paced, revolutionary way, and that was address the needs of cybersecurity. The investment was heavy. We implemented changes very quickly, and today we're driving security down. It's not just about making sure you have insurance for cybersecurity, but we are driving good security principles down into our software development practices and deployment practices. This year, what did we have? Change Healthcare. Change Healthcare is a claims processor that's part of United. It processes about 40% of health claims in the United States. Again, another health company. And it was attacked with ransomware. We weren't talking about that much 10 years ago. We were talking about data breaches, but we weren't talking about somebody taking your data and kidnapping it and asking for a ransom. Change paid the ransom, and you still evidently can buy that data on the dark web, unfortunately. So this is a reality that is absolutely going to continue to require our commitment and our investment. There are two other things, areas of change that I want to talk about that are much more specific to NIPR. The first one wasn't on the worry list 10 years ago. Maybe if you were an infectious disease expert, it would have been on it would have been on his worry list, but it wasn't on ours. And every time I want to talk, I talk about COVID and talk about it with respect to our business, I want to start very respectfully and say, we can never forget. In this country, we lost 1.7 million people. We had, those are reported cases in every state and territory in the United States. And in the first 2 years, 112 million people got sick. And I hope a lot of you don't go home with it, because that seemed to be a trend this summer, people going home from conferences with COVID. But it created an enormous amount of change for NIPR. The first thing was the need to coordinate the response to producer licensing changing overnight. In March of 2020, as governments went remote and closed down, we had lots of questions about renewal periods and examinations and what are we going to do? Do we need to have temporary licenses to address some of these issues? So this became the focus of our work for about 9 months. And in those early months, we were updating our website 4, 5, 6 times a day because of all of the orders that were being issued by commissioners, and hosting calls to communicate among and between the industry and regulators. For NIPR, we went from a almost 100% on-premises company at 1100 Walnut, which is less than half a mile from here, right up the street, to today, where we have a fully remote company with team members in about 50% of our states across the country. A completely different organization. And that shift occurred very quickly, and it occurred because of that investment that we had made in technology. We were able to make that shift. Unlike many industries, COVID had, in fact, we call it the COVID effect, a pop in the number of licenses. So what this graph shows you is year-over-year percentage changes in the number of licenses held. These aren't individuals, these are the number of licenses. And we went up to double-digit increase year-over-year in those first 2 years of COVID. Why is that? Traditionally, when there's an economic downturn, remember, unemployment went up to 14.7% in that first year of COVID. It's 4.2 right now. So a percentage, 10.5% higher than it was then. People will often move into the insurance industry in times of economic downturn, and particularly so when insurance was so front of mind. Life insurance was very front of mind, as was health insurance. So we saw a big bounce in our numbers and in our industry, unlike many other verticals that had a very different impact. The other area for NIPR was a continued focus on uniformity and reciprocity. So you didn't think you were getting out of a talk with me without talking about uniformity and reciprocity. So 10 years ago, we had 9 states that were not fully leveraging NIPR for what we call our major license types, or our major credentialing types. So it's appointments and terminations, and resident and non-resident licensing, new and renewal for individuals and business entities. And I thought about it yesterday when Michael Massimino was talking, the astronaut was talking yesterday. He was so great. I mean, it was just such a great keynote. And he was talking about he got turned down and then turned down again and then turned down again in trying to become an astronaut. And we heard a lot. It's never going to happen. You're never going to be able to get these states onto NIPR. It's not going to happen. And we kept going back and we kept talking with our colleagues and we kept making a pitch. And as a result, California, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Florida, Kansas, Massachusetts, Hawaii, New York, and Washington State have all joined the team. And I'm going to ask the regulators from those 9 states who are here to please stand up. And for those of you who are back in your offices, I'd ask you to stand up as well. Please stand up. Come on, Ellen Baxback, get up. Thank you. And now I'd like the folks from NIPR and SBS to please stand up, because you have partnered with them. Please stand up, because you partnered with them to help make that happen. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of, you know, the thing about what we do is, the expression we always use at NIPR is it's in the weeds. We're always in the weeds. It's so detail oriented. And so it's complicated and it's difficult, and change is hard as it is. And so we really genuinely thank you, because this has been it's been a long time coming. I think we just released New York on Thursday for adjusters, for adjuster licensing. So it's just a great, great story to be able to tell for our colleagues in industry. So, you know, yesterday at the event with the officers, they made some predictions about the future. I think Superintendent Dwyer talked about AI as being incredibly important in the future. And tomorrow morning, we are going to hear a presentation by two colleagues from Gartner who are going to help educate us about generative AI, help reassure us about the fact that we've been using AI for a long time, and what we probably will see in the future. Commissioner White talked about data and the use of data as we are trying to assess some of the climate and storm-related issues, storm severity-related issues that we're having. And Commissioner Godfrey made an interesting comment about mitigation, that the industry is going to be doing a big push around how to make better homes, and how to make solar panels that aren't harmed by hailstorms. You know, there's a lot that the insurance industry can do to incentivize really good risk mitigation practices and damage prevention kind of practices. I am out of the business of making predictions. When I go back and read some of those presentations, you know, that I did back in 15 and 16, it's, you know, I'm a little sheepish about it. But change we have, but it has been evolutionary and not revolutionary. And I think that is what will continue. But I'm not going to make any predictions. What I will do, however, is make a guarantee. And that guarantee is that in 10 years from today, in 2034, A, I will not be standing here, and B, the NIPR team will continue to be absolutely committed to its mission of providing cost-effective, streamlined, and uniform producer licensing solutions for the industry and for our state regulators. That is an absolute guarantee. So, with that, we have about 10 minutes left. We're going to have folks with microphones, and we also have, I think, somebody who is monitoring the chat function for the folks who are at home. So any questions or any attempts to try to get me to make predictions about the future? So have at it. Have at it. Come on. You gotta have something. Okay, Richard. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. You talked about uniformity and reciprocity. In the next 10 years, do you think we would be more reciprocal or more uniform or less?
Richard, I love you, man. All right, so here's my hot take. We have seen a move away from uniformity and reciprocity in the state-based system in producer licensing space. And I think one of the reasons is that Graham Leach Bliley was 25 years ago, which was the big federal threat to our state-based system in producer licensing. 25 years ago is a long time. Congress, it'll be 10 years ago in January, passed NARAB, and the National Association of Registered Agents and Brokers for the newer folk, that was supposed to create a federal standard for non-resident licenses that carriers, agencies, and brokers could voluntarily adopt. That law has never been implemented. So what I would say is, it seems to me, and remember I'm a former regulator, so, is that we tend to move towards reciprocity and uniformity when there's a big stick being held over our heads, and when there isn't, it's easy to get siloed again. So if that's kind of the natural progression of things, then it would be easy to predict that we'll move away from uniformity and reciprocity. However, I've got to say, industry has noticed, and we've got some folks here in this room who would be happy to talk to you about that, because they sure talk to us about it. And they have noticed the movement away from uniformity and reciprocity. And so I think you're going to be hearing more of this issue being brought up to the commissioner level, certainly. And who knows what might happen at the federal level. I mean, it's just, they can't agree on what to have for lunch. So I'm not sure that the current political climate is one where we would see a really serious federal threat. But I'll tell you what would change that is something really bad happening to one of our big companies. Now, is that a big risk? Probably not, because we're pretty darn good about keeping our companies healthy. But that would be the risk. The other, health, I think, is kind of its own. Health is kind of its own thing. It has a lot of federal regulation in it already. The other big issue is in the P&C space is areas that are becoming increasingly uninsurable. They're big, big swaths of our country that admitted carriers just don't have much of a risk appetite for anymore. So you could be seeing more government getting more and more into providing coverage in areas sort of like the flood program. So that could bring some focus on these issues of uniformity and reciprocity. But that's why I think we've got to stay committed to it. And again, I say this as a former regulator because it's a black eye for a really good regulatory system. State-based regulation is strong, but for us to have differences about stuff that really doesn't matter at the end of the day, that doesn't help. That doesn't help the cause. So I don't know, Richard. but we have to deal with so folks don't care.
Could you comment on possible future ramifications of the recent Supreme Court decision regarding the Chevron doctrine on producer licensing at all?
No. So, help me.
Basically, from what I understand, they said courts are better regulators than the agencies that Congress established to regulate
the
that
administrative
area.
law, the administrative law ruling. Okay, yeah. So the reference is to, and I didn't recognize Chevron. That the Supreme Court made a decision that really many argue has a negative impact on the impact of administrative agencies and administrative law. However, as I understand it, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, that was a federal case. That involved a federal agency. And so because this is a state-based system, it does not apply directly to us. Now, will we have entities at the state level trying to do the same thing? Would companies be coming into states trying to say, you can't make decisions around things? I mean, it's based on state law, right? An example of something that, carriers didn't like was when we would look at their catastrophe models, right? They never wanted to share what the elements were in catastrophe models. Well, we had a state law that said that you couldn't use a catastrophe model in our state unless the commissioner had signed off on those qualifications. So it isn't just discretionary decision-making or, in these cases, the executive giving authority to administrative agencies. In the states, the authority of regulators comes up through statute, comes up through the statutes of your state laws. So I do think, it's a great question, and I do think there is protection at the state level that doesn't exist in Chevron. Anybody at home? Any people who are, okay, all right. Thank you all very much. I know you have to get off to your next event, and really appreciate you being here. Thank you.